Photography happened to me when I was passing out of school.
To me, photography is like dealing with all the emotions.
Photography to me is fun, travel, live life.
Imagine how cool would it be to have a career that not just takes you around the world but also challenges your creativity all the time. Hello and welcome. A buzzword among today's generation, photography careers are well suited for people always on the ball for a new adventure. So let your creative juices flow and tune into the show as we find out how you can kickstart a photography career.
Photography, a contemporary art and wordless storytelling, is one of the most popular of career choices today for many youngsters across the world. From working in the wild and rugged outback to shooting in the comfort of a studio setup, photography offers a range of challenging and dynamic careers. And with its growing popularity and the demand for skilled photographers, professional courses in photography are now offered at a number of institutes across the globe. The Yale School of Fine Arts and the New York Film Academy, for example, are some of the top places for learning photography.
You see, any art form, including photography, can be taught in many different ways, but only up to some extent, which is the technical aspect of it, the history of photography, how it started, what happened in between in all those years, 150 years, and where photography is today to make them aware. And the most important part, when you have to teach any creative medium, to ignite the creative urge in those individuals.
Photography courses in India require a minimum qualification of 10+2. However, institute-specific requirements may need a candidate to have studied for a bachelor's degree as well. Along with a basic education, an attentive and perceptive mind, an eye for detail and creativity together sum up to the desirable skill set of a good photographer. While photography courses generally begin as an introduction to the basics of film and digital cameras and image making, the principles behind picture composition later allow aspiring photographers to specialize in a specific type of photography. Understanding the fundamentals of photography is as important as knowing your equipment well. Shutter speed, aperture, ISO representing sensitivity and depth of field form the fundamental bedrock of photography, and creatively playing with them can change the picture largely. But clicking great pictures is not just knowing all about your camera and these photography basics. It also requires a sound understanding of picture composition, patterns, symmetry, shapes and colors, brightness and darkness among others are all elements that go to make up a great picture composition.
It's not about composition, it's about elements, people, and whole set of situations coming together in certain rhythm that forms the composition. Then it's wonderful.
Once you've got your basics set right, next comes learning how to see the light like a pro. Creative use of light and lighting can transform a good picture into a great picture. It determines not just the brightness and darkness of colors but also sets the tone, mood and atmosphere of the picture which has to be clicked. The last and final lesson on photography post-production is all about correcting and enhancing your pictures. Raw images straight out of the camera can look like they have flaws like bad lighting, grain, blurring or distortions. They need to be processed to bring out their best. And post-production editing does just that, improves the quality and attractiveness of the image, and presto, you have a dramatically changed picture.
Don't take all those good pictures which you've seen before, which are stored here. Don't photograph, don't take those pictures. Then only life and nature will offer you something.
Some of the popular post-production techniques being image enhancement, image manipulation, color correction and image restoration, and these make the picture seem like, well, another picture. Well, having learnt enough about photography courses, it's time to move on to getting some hands-on information on the basic equipment you would need to kickstart clicking. Sandeep, to start off with photography, having a decent camera is a must for anyone who wants to become a photographer. What, according to you, is the best camera that a person can have when they are looking at, starting a career in photography?
I think the best camera anybody can have is a DSLR. It doesn't matter which level of DSLR, but a DSLR is very important because a DSLR helps you control your exposures, control how you want the result to be. It keeps with everything within your control. It's not controlled by the camera, but the camera is controlled by you as a photographer.
What about somebody who cannot afford to have a DSLR? Is there an alternative for them?
I would say no. I think what you need is a basic DSLR.
Also talking about the kind of lenses, what are the basic lens requirements that we talk about when starting off with photography?
See, lenses depend on what you want to do.
Right.
It's completely what kind of photography you want to do. If I'm a sports photographer, if I'm a journalist, if I'm a fashion photographer, I might need, or a wildlife photographer, I might need very long lenses. If I'm doing architecture, I will need wide angle lenses. If I'm doing portraits, I could just be doing with a 50 mm prime lens, or have a 105 mm lens or lens with me. So or a 85 mm lens. So there is no standardization to what lens is good or bad.
So what beyond tripods, lenses and camera?
There are these lights and stands, you have backgrounds. You can see this is a honeycomb here. It's a honeycomb which kind of reduces the light, but it does not soften the light completely. So it's kind of helps you get textures when you are doing tabletops. And then you have soft boxes. These are lights with diffusers, so they kind of take the hardness of the light away.
What would be your advice for a beginner? Is it necessary to have all of this equipment?
You need a space. You don't. I mean, you can do with a decent space, at least a tabletop kind of space, which is like this, which is not huge, but you still can maneuver your equipment. You need about 3-4 lights. About 4 lights is good. 4 lights is not very expensive nowadays. You need a tripod, you need these stands, and maybe your backdrops.
We had a chance to speak with the man behind one of the most coveted photographs ever clicked, the Afghan girl, a name many of us would remember the picture with. Steve McCurry is a world-renowned photographer and an American photojournalist with more than 30 years of experience in photography. Take a look at his exclusive interview with NDTV. Steve, to start off with, a lot of young people, young photographers in India are watching our show today, and they would want to know what's the story behind you being a photographer. Can you just take us back into the time and tell us how photography happened to you?
Well, my first passion was travel, and I was always looking for a way to travel with purpose. So when I started studying film in college, I kind of gravitated to photography because I wanted to I found photography much more suited to my personality, and I thought that would be the kind of a passport to travel, tell stories with my camera, and work for magazines.
Right. A lot of photographers also talk about having the right frame and capturing the decisive moment. How do you respond when you are out there trying to click pictures?
Well, I think the best way to answer that is just to be curious, to look for the right expression, the right moment, the right light, the right setting. It takes a lot of experience, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of hard work, but in time you can sort of hone your craft.
What separates a good picture from an amazing, great picture?
Well, I think great pictures tell great stories. Great pictures, I think, are ones you can't forget.
Right.
Ones that are memorable, ones that change you in some ways, pictures that you can learn from.
Right. What about education in photography? Do you think we need to make it more mainstream?
Well, I think we can all learn to take better pictures. I think photography is part of all of our lives. I think it's great to learn how to make better pictures. I'm not sure I would encourage so many people to take up photography as a profession,
right.
But I think we can certainly learn the craft, learn the art, make better pictures, and have fun with photography.
There are many photographers who sort of struggle to make the moolah. It's very tough to get yourself established. What would be your one piece of advice to people who are struggling, just emerging photographers?
Well, I think there's no substitute for hard work. I think the you just takes a lot of discipline, a lot of time, sometimes blood, sweat, and tears. But with time and effort, I think anybody can achieve their goal.
Can you share with us one prominent or most memorable experience that you've had throughout your career in photography?
Well, I think the best moment in my life was meeting and photographing the Dalai Lama.
How about, starting off your career with the Afghan girl happening to you? Can you just take us back into that story, how you got into Afghanistan? It's so exciting.
Well, I was doing a story for National Geographic on the Afghan-Pakistan border, and I happened one day to be wandering through a refugee camp and went into a school and saw this very interesting little girl with this incredible face, and I got permission from the teacher to photograph the students, and this little girl had this incredible story written on her face. She was an orphan, a refugee, somebody living a very difficult life, but somehow she still managed to have the dignity and great courage to live that life and to power through all that hardship.
And can you share with us the experience of being a photojournalist? What's the thrill, what's the adventure behind that?
Well, I think being a photojournalist, it's about being a witness to history, exploring this world, telling stories, informing people about what's going on in their world, and trying to make their world a better place.
What would be your final message to lots of young photographers in India who would look up to inspirational stories like you? What would you want to say to them?
Well, I think the main point about photography is that this would be a way to be curious, to explore the world, to exercise your creativity, and to have fun with your camera and photograph your friends and your family and tell interesting stories.
Well, that was an exclusive interview with Steve McCurry, the world-renowned photographer. Thrilling as it may sound, a wildlife photography career is all about being in the wild and dusty outdoors. To talk more on wildlife photography, we have with us the famous Indian wildlife photographer brothers, Ajay and Vijay Bedi. Welcome to the show, both of you. So to start off with, I want to know from both of you, was wildlife photography a very natural and first choice for you, or it happened because of the legacy that follows?
I would say yes, because once you're born in the family where you're surrounded by flora and fauna and obviously wonderful wildlife all around. When you're born in family, yes, it does make a lot of difference because we were on our vacations or otherwise also we were being surrounded by wildlife, nature, flora and fauna. So when you see all this stuff, you do get inclined towards wildlife and nature.
Very true. Plus, adding to that, uh, throughout our childhood, we were close to the wildlife, as Vijay said. We used to have vacation. We used to go to all the national parks and see the wildlife. Plus, at the same time, we were in continuous training, from our father and from grandfather. Okay, this is the way, to take hold the camera. This is the way to take a picture. Animal sounds, lot of things. It's on the process. Training, training, training. So you're kind of inbound somehow trained to become a photographer, and that too a wildlife photographer and a filmmaker.
You both have shot all across the country. Can you tell us about one destination which is like always on top of your mind where you would want to get back and shoot wildlife?
It's very difficult to pinpoint one, but I would say still Kahana being MP, the center of India. When you talk about Kipling Forest, that's the place to be. The wildlife and the landscape. Wildlife is variety. Once you go into safari, you see from tigers to python just crossing your way, from some deers to barasingas. It's just amazing, and and dhole also, if you're lucky enough. And even the landscape is just beautiful, from Shola forest to from Sal forest to grasslands. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. I might slightly differ. That's definitely beautiful, and the center of tiger, and I personally feel snow leopards is something which even excites me, because it's not just the wildlife, it's the kind of the whole approach of getting the animal and seeing the animal, and the difficulty, the exclusiveness of the animal.
What makes a picture perfect picture? When we talk about wildlife photography, what do we mean when they say it's a great picture?
I would say, see personally, what when people take picture, they normally go really into subject. What I would suggest them that, or what we do is we step out a bit. We just go back and see wildlife from a distance, which means not literal, but in for example, I remember we were in Corbett National Park and we wanted to take a picture of tigers, and I mean it's the picture of elephant, and to have an elephant in a Corbett setting, it's very difficult because you normally see them grazing in front of grass, or normally they're hidden on elephant grass. So we were on a machan and just waiting to capture the sunlight, and we saw this elephant crossing the Ramganga. So we waited, we waited, and as soon as the elephant came in right in the middle of the Ramganga, it just got that picture. So that whole atmosphere and the composition and the depth uh, uh, says everything about of the picture. That summarize the entire atmosphere during that time.
What would be your advice to young photographers?
People do ask us which camera we should buy to do wildlife photography. I would say, it's not the camera which makes it's not the camera which takes the picture. Right. It's the person behind it. So even if you're mobile, you start getting hang of taking pictures, and talk about river behind you which is drying up, or talk about pollution. So there's several ways to start instead of waiting for the right moment. Right. Second important tip for the wildlife filmmakers, I would say you should know your equipment before you go into the field, because you should know which camera, because things may happen and it goes. If you miss it, you might have to wait for a day, maybe a week, or maybe a month, or maybe next year to come back. Right. So the animals won't give you a second chance. It's not any actor which you can have retakes.
If Into the Wild is not your work type and studio lights and glamour is what attracts you, then a career in fashion photography is definitely the right choice for you. Let's have a look at the interesting story of a leading Indian fashion photographer, Tarun Khewal, and find out how you too can become a fashion photographer.
An engineer by profession, before kick-starting a career in fashion photography, Tarun Khewal is a renowned Indian fashion photographer from Delhi. Having started his professional career as a design engineer, Tarun soon got bored of what he saw as a mundane engineering job. And in the year 1989, with a camera gifted by his father and little or no experience in photography, Tarun decided to experiment his luck with photography.
First of all, settled career, I just don't agree to, and that was the key thing which was very boring for me. Having a settled career, that means you have a very set life. You start in the morning, you finish in the evening, and today my life is like very different. Every day is a new day. I meet so many people from different walks of life. Internationally, I travel. So the life is very exciting now, very adventurous.
Starting off as an apprentice under famous photographers like Hardev Singh and Atul Kaspekar and others, Tarun's full-time entry into the world of fashion photography happened gradually after working with magazines like Society and First City.
Well, those days were different. You were in school, you want to buy a roll, you'll have to do something to get the money. You can't go to your dad again and again that I want to buy a roll, then process a roll and all that. It was a very complicated process, and it was very expensive in those days also. And sitting in Lucknow if you want to do this.
His simplistic approach to photography with a touch of glamour has won him several accolades in India and abroad. The Hasselblad Masters Award being most prominent among his achievements. And while fashion photography continues to be on the top of his list, Tarun also specializes in commercial photography. His works associated with international brands like L'Oreal, Reebok, Sony and Pepsi among others.
Well, that's not difficult. If you're doing really good work, somebody will call you for some job. It's up to you how you want to take, whether you really want to do that. For the longest time, I was only doing editorials. I was not doing commercial work at all.
Also known for his editorial works in international editorials like Vogue, Harper's Bazaar and Elle, Tarun is an inspiration for many aspiring fashion photographers.
Change the rules. Change the rules. I mean, don't follow the set pattern. Don't try and do things which other people are doing.
It's time for us to say goodbye. Catch up with us again tomorrow, same time and show. And in the meanwhile, if you have any career-related queries or feedback to share with, then do write into us on our Facebook and Twitter.
Catch the heads-up episodes you might have missed during the week at these times only on NDTV Prime.